Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome to a discussion that I am super excited about talking with everyone, and want you to join in the conversation if you're watching this. Even if you're watching this after it's been posted, we're going to leave some notes. I'm going to post a link to a Word document that you can keep up with important things that were made, because the goal is to leave educators watching this with some tools of how to trust your own voice so you can get better at saying no to things that your professional expertise tells you are not actually in students' best interest, to have more time and energy to do things that do matter. And speak up for yourself. And we're joined by an all-star team tonight. We're waiting on one individual who has not been able to log on yet due to technical difficulties. But we're going to go around and introduce ourselves to get started. I'm Pete Stone, teacher in Chester, South Carolina. Taught for about 10 years, absolutely love it. I actually went to medical school for a few years and hated it, passed the board, got in medical school, and I said, screw this. Poet friend of mine from Chester, Vivian Ayers, wrote me a letter cussing me out saying, leave medical school, walk out like you walked in. I said, yes, ma'am. Gave me the courage to do it, and back to teaching. So I'm passionate about doing this. That's kind of my story. But let everyone go around. I'm not sure how the position on the screen, but CT Kirk, why don't you introduce yourself next, and we'll just go from there.
Yes, sir. I'm CT Kirk. I teach at Lancaster County Schools. Been teaching now for 8 years. Teach sixth grade social studies. Like you, I love it. Love the opportunity to be able to help develop young minds. I'm also a pastor in my local city of Rock Hill, South Carolina, and I am an author of 3 books. So excited to be on tonight.
Thank you.
Well, I'm up in Rock Hill. My name is Inga Carey. I'm an elementary music teacher up here, and I absolutely love it. This is my 13th year teaching, and I'm a proud SCEA member. I'm also the secretary of the SCEA's local group, York County Educator Association.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Newsom. I have been teaching, this is my 16th year teaching English, and I've been in Richland 2 for most of that time. I'm also the research director for SC for Ed, and I'm really excited about this. I learned a thing about Pete just now that I didn't know, so that's a good start.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're going to just jump into the conversation. I'm going to frame it a little bit, and then we'll just kind of go around and share our expertise. But every one of y'all is just phenomenal stuff in the classroom as well as outside the classroom. That's doing great things. I think we lost Inger there. Hope we didn't offend her. Just kidding. I think she'll be back. She was just working recently with Lisa Ellis on her campaign as well. Steve, CT with that. Steve, also you have to mention the other duties as assigned, and CT your book. So all of that's important. And one thing I want to try to bring into the conversation tonight is how do you ensure that you have time to do those things that are important to you in addition to what you do in the classroom. But one of the topics tonight comes from this wonderful book. I don't know if anybody's read this book. It's called Essentialism by Greg McCown. If you have not read this book, I highly encourage you to, because it's all about how just study after study shows that we get more accomplished by doing less more meaningfully, more intentionally, more with purpose. And when I read this book, it just flies in the face of the whole way that our curriculum is structured. Our system has what I think teachers would agree, parents would agree, and students agree is hyperactivity mistaken for productivity. And this isn't just in schools. I think our whole society is addicted to being busy, 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 busy. But when we look at what we're trying to accomplish, when we say what's best for the students, we know that as the studies show, probably 10% of what we have time to do ends up making 90% of the difference with our kids. And the other 90% of bull crap of hoops you have to jump through to satisfy people never in the classroom or haven't been in years, that 90% of stuff we spend our time doing has little to no impact on the students. In fact, it has a negative effect because we only have so much time during the day. And if we're spending so much time doing things that don't matter, we don't have time to do things that do. And I'm just going to finish this and we'll go around and get some of y'all's input. But the sad irony of the time we're in, we have students who are burned out, anxious, all-time depression. Everyone says we're testing too much. The system solution, more test, right? I mean, seriously. Yes, we're testing too much. We're going to add these more. And they're clever. They don't call them standardized tests. They call them benchmark tests, CFAs, PLCs. I mean, my God, the acronyms that go into these diagnostic testings. Do they think we have no clue what our kids are doing? Uh, we spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, all year with that kid, and you want me to give you data from these little multiple choice ABCD tests. Now, the other ridiculous thing is teachers leaving at an all-time rate. Teachers not coming to the professions, being burned out from doing too much. Their solution, give us more stuff to do. It's just crazy. And then with the election of Ellen Weaver, we have not enough public funds to support public schools. So now let's give what we do have to private schools. So all this is so tone deaf. What I want us to realize tonight is, how do we stop waiting for the system to get it and just admit that we don't believe they are going to get it? And what can we do to still do what's truly best for our students and overcome this kind of uh, over medication, if you will? We have a system, public education is over medicated patient. And instead of reducing the meds that are killing our patient, we keep giving them more medication, which is only making the system die. And that is too much busy work. So I want us to go around and identify some things that are busy work, things that are beneficial, and how do you successfully in our profession, in our classroom, stand up for what we know is best. Y'all do amazing things in the classroom. I know Steve does other duties as assigned the blog. He can talk about some of those things. CT, if you haven't kept up with him on social media, you need to, because he's in costume frequently with his students. It's phenomenal to watch the things that he brings to the classroom, the energy he has with his kids. So bring that in. And oh my God, someone just talked about Read to Succeed. Wonder where that idea came from. Somebody who was in charge of the EOC. And let's go around and talk some about this, what you see as being the problem. And I want to talk about solutions of how you successfully stand up to push back, to say no to things we know don't matter.
Well, I think, it's funny we're talking about benchmark testing because we were doing that today at my school. And yeah, it took us a 90-minute class period and we still weren't done. So I think that is probably a good microcosm of the whole system. I think it's going to depend a lot on each work site there, because one thing that we do in South Carolina, I think very effectively, is make teachers feel like they're siloed into different districts and different schools and different classrooms, and they're all different. So even though we all kind of have this joke that we have to do other duties as assigned by the administrator, those are going to vary so wildly from different site to different site. But the simple answer is people have to learn how to say no. And as you said, Pete, like we can't wait for someone to reform the system. We have to figure out how to say no today to the things that we feel like we really can't do. No one's going to take anything off your plate unless you take something off your own plate, unfortunately.
Right. Quick follow up to that point too is good thing that can help if you realize when you say yes to things that don't matter, you are saying no to things that do. So you're choosing to say no to something. We have to stop saying no to things that matter just to make those who don't know what's going on happy. We have to trust our voice and stop waiting for that external validation, because it's not coming.
Right.
They're just not going to get it. Yeah. So if one technique I can help. If someone says, "Can you do so and so, so and so, so and so? Can you do this?" You might say, "Sure. What are these other top priorities would you want me to not do? Because I can't do them all. So tell me, if I do this, what do you not want me to do?" To help them realize who you're talking to. I want to come back to those 90-minute benchmark tests in a minute. What subject do you teach again, Steve?
I teach English and research.
Okay. What year English?
10th grade. Well,
with the
English 2.
EOC year, right?
Right. Yeah. So
So you
and this
got that.
year, a lot of freshmen too. So
Right. And that's why they don't realize you have this huge EOC that the state requires you to take, and then they cram in these 90-minute benchmarks. I don't know about you. They end up telling me nothing I don't already know about my student that wastes time from something that could be meaningful to get them prepared for that test. Again, to make someone not there feel like something's happening in the classroom. Not me, the teacher, not the student, some third party. I don't know who that information goes to. Inga, CT, how do y'all feel?
I feel my admin and my school, I think, do a pretty good job about making sure all the unnecessary things aren't put on us. And if they do, they try to either do part of the work for us or help us out and kind of script what the district is looking for. And it's not cheating; it's literally helping us out. So no fault there. Um, and as a elementary music teacher, fortunately, I don't have tests of my own, like state standardized tests and stuff. But my music PLC is coming up with a common assessment now. So it's interesting to kind of see all of this coming together with that. But Pete, I did want to mention something earlier. You said hoops. I actually wear, I don't know if y'all can see this, but it's
Yeah.
3 hoops along, intertwined with each other. My mom got me that necklace after I got my master's, legitimately. And because I had to jump through so many different hoops in my life. So jumping through hoops is one of the requirements that educators have to do that shouldn't be a requirement.
Right. Right. I want to talk before this evening gets over who comes up with those hoops we have to jump through and what could be pushed back on with that. CT, what's your experience?
Well, I think first of all, it comes down to really prioritizing as the teacher. Yes, we know that the state and leaders are going to put hoops on us, but a lot of times we also put hoops on ourselves. It is us that is spending planning time and time at home trying to make the most excellent lesson without realizing sometimes we're teaching for our own self-esteem and not for the kids in betterment. I told my social studies department one time, if you're up there teaching for 15 minutes, you're just talking, then definitely kids are not learning because I don't know if I can sit through any lecture for 50 minutes and learn anything. So what I found was more beneficial was collaborating with the ELA teacher, finding out test questions, finding out where our kids are going wrong with the testing side of it. What words don't they know? In social studies, we do more ELA now than we do social studies because nobody in life is going to ask you the dates, the places, or the names. They want to know if you know the meaning of the content. So teaching themes is very important for us. Understanding main ideas, understanding text features. These things help us so that benchmark don't become a scary thing for us, but we're already prepared. And so we're learning to move according to ahead of the schedule and not waiting on a test to scare us. Right now we're preparing for SC ready and we don't even know test questions. But if I can get them to understand what summarize means, if I can get them to understand what explain means, if I can get them to understand the dialogue that's going to be used, getting them away from a lot of the what is and how is question and more of a academic language. I'm preparing my students more, and it's not as stressful as on me. I don't go home and grade papers. I use planning time, and I know how to tell administration that my planning time is for me to be able to catch up, to be able to be ahead of schedule, to plan out, so that when I come home, I'm not bombarded with trying to grade tests. And I think a lot of times we put more on ourselves because we have self-esteem issues that we feel like if I don't bring home this, if I don't bring home that, and I often say this, my work day is going to end at 4:00. My work day ends when my pay ends. Teaching is the only job that I ever heard somebody say, well, you do it for the love of the kids. You never hear of a preacher say, I just do it for the love of souls, but I don't want any pay from it. You don't hear LeBron James say, I play basketball for the love of the game, but I don't want a check from it. So I look at that as the same way as my profession. It's my profession, it's not my life. And if I make it my life, then I'm going to be putting more of the effort than my kids are, and I'm going to be burnt out at the end of the day. I don't think anything should ever burn you out, especially if something that you love. And so I'm not going to let my love of teaching burn me out.
Now, that's a good point. Again, our society wants to tell us, if you're not burned out, if you're not broken down, then something's wrong with you. You must not be doing it right. There's this triumphant thing for being. We brag. I'm so busy all the time. We all have 24 hours in a day. No one's popping in and out of existence that I know of. So, in truth, we are all equally busy. The question is what we're doing beneficial? Uh, Everyone's doing something for 24 hours. Is what we're doing beneficial? And as you say, is it enriching myself, my soul, and the souls of those around me? Or is it just playing this game of, I got through this, 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 I got through this? Mindy Penn had a great comment too, that she had said does not apologize when it helps students. And I think one thing's important, if you're listening, listen to some of the buzzwords that individuals use. When they say we got to do what's in the best interest of the students, you know, the parents, the student themselves, and the teacher, I would argue, probably have the best idea of what is actually best for the students. Arming ourselves with that knowledge, we can turn that around when someone tells us to do something and say, could you please explain to me how what you're asking me to do is truly best for my students? And then we can unload on anyone with all kinds of facts and evidence and insights what truly is best for our students. I can tell you this student's grandmother died Tuesday night before she took that benchmark. You don't have a clue that happened. So the data you're suggesting, tell me what you want me to do, how that's actually best for my students. Use those words in a Socrates way back to the individual who gave them to you. And that pushes and says, don't just give me holla, do what's best for the students. Show me how what you want me to do is actually best for the students. And let's compare what your answer is compared to mine. And trust, you are the expert as the educator in the room. You're spending a lot more hours with that kid than the one person who looked at that map test score and said, you know, trust yourself and your data. So ask those questions. Ask questions is a strong way of saying no if you're scared to literally say, no, just ask enough questions, and then what happens is they won't want to mess with you because someone asks questions is much harder to deal with. Now, I want to say too, I love my school. So I'm saying this not so much because I'm bitter at my personal school. I have a wonderful admin who's been highly supportive of me and what I do. And I've been successful, ironically, at standardized tests, which I absolutely abhor. But I've done that not through what I've done, through what I've been allowed to not do. I do not work students bell to bell. I think that's a terrible thing, bell to bell. I take the Finland model, and every 30 or 40 minutes, I give a 10-minute break of just whatever. I want to teach my students. Now's a great time to pull your phone out, do your thing, unwind, do whatever. We need more breaks built into our day. Again, not how much can we cram in there, but what can we take out, take out, take out? Because this room's a great example. If I took all this clutter and crap out behind me here, what's left would stand out a lot more. Like, look at Steve's room. He has his nice guitar up there. It's easy to find. Back here in my room, I got a banjo somewhere up there and all the clutter. Yeah. So by just, there you go. Get rid of the junk, and then what is left naturally breathes and works so much better. So remove, remove, remove. Um, all right. So the next question as we move along here is I want to talk about a little bit, maybe it's not worth it a whole lot, but how do we get to this point of feeling a need to get so much ABCD stuff? Why is so much of our job, and even in music in elementary school, designed to getting uh, these these shared, what is it, PLC, these common formal assessments? This is something I think districts must have gone to some meeting somewhere and heard we need more common formal assessments so we're all on the same page at the same time. Do y'all think it's possible to differentiate what each student needs while at the same time standardizing everyone to be on the same schedule across the whole district? Would y'all speak to that point?
I think, honestly, I think there's obviously a place for data, and I think teachers care about data, and it's just sort of fundamental to what we do. We're gathering information about our students, but like you said, it's not always quantitative data, it might be more important information, but sometimes it is. And obviously every teacher is going to create assessments of their own, and they're going to get some valuable information from that. But the sort of big data standardized test answer, I feel like, is historically not coming from people who are trying to improve schools. I think a lot of what we're in now goes back to very bad faith, like A Nation at Risk, which was a report that came out under the Reagan administration that was not ever intended to find out what was going on in schools. It was intended to confirm a pre-existing belief that public schools were failing, so that we could do the same thing that you mentioned earlier that we're doing in South Carolina right now, which is pour more money into private schools, put less resources into public schools because we could argue that they're failing. So a lot of our assessments, and I think individual districts and superintendents and school boards in South Carolina really do mean well when they adopt these systems. And I'm not saying that no good information ever comes out of any of these things, and I don't think any school boards ever adopted a benchmark because they wanted to prove that their own district was not successful. But I do think that's where the original impulse comes from. There's a long, unfortunately, very classist, racist, sexist history of standardized testing that goes all the way back to things like the Stanford-Binet tests.
Eugenicist, right? Eugenicist designed the original one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean the military was the first to use those. It's a way of tracking people into different types of careers. It's something that our society really has sort of unhealthy fixation with, the idea that we live in a merit-based culture, and that the way to find someone's merit is to test them, and that the way to test how well a teacher or a school is doing, that therefore would also be to test them. And we all know as teachers that those tests are not, even the good ones are not designed to assess or compare teachers or schools. Even the ones that we use for our school report card are at their best designed to measure the content knowledge that individual students have learned at the best. And we all know that they don't always do that either, but they're certainly not designed to rank me against Inga or rank me against someone in another state. They're designed to rank my students against themselves. How much better did they score on the standardized test than they did last year? There are problems with that too, obviously. But yeah, I think until we accept that a lot of our current accountability culture isn't really about accountability, I don't think we're going to be able to fix it.
CT or Inga, you have anything you want to add to that?
Mainly, we mentioned about how the PLCs, which are professional learning communities, how at least in my case for music, how we're doing this common test together. And I think the bottom line is to help us learn from each other and learn our strengths and weaknesses, and then being able to help each other out and bring each other up. But there's other things that could do that as well. In our meeting today, we even discussed, hey, who knows anything about sound systems for when we're doing Veterans Day programs or all this and that. So like there's other ways to find out the information other than a test.
Yes.
I think the biggest problem with the tests that they give is that they don't teach how to unpack the data in which is presenting. I remember working with Fontes and Panel, and I thought Fontes and Panel was simply to measure my kids' growth, but until a professional said, no, Fontes and Panel for you to be able to see their strengths versus their weaknesses, so that you can base your lessons around certain areas rather than trying to just teach a broad blanketed standard. You're able to unpack what your students need. And from that, they're going to be able to grow, because every student may not be struggling with comprehension. Some students may struggle with fluency. Some students may struggle with text structure. And we were never taught how to unpack the standards. So we were looking at, okay, you got this grade, but why did you get that grade? And I think so many times we do that as teachers. Okay, student, you got a D, but we never look at why did you get a D? What didn't you understand? If the question was shaped this way, would it be better? I know a lot of people run to IXL, and one of the things we had to talk about in our social studies department was IXL is not a great program for social studies teachers because every kid can't read on that 10th grade IXL reading level, even though they say it's classified based on rank. But okay, if I'm teaching sixth grade world history, there is not going to be any other world history on that level but sixth grade and then the high school level. And so it's going to make my kids feel like they can't learn. But of course, the wording is so off. And so I think that when we learn to unpack, because I don't have a problem with testing, I just have a problem with the fact that it's not being unpacked. And they sitting down with schools and saying, okay, schools, if you're having this C in this area, then let's get you some support. Let's put some money into this area. So maybe next time your school can get a B in this area rather than, like Steve said, just saying, okay, public schools are failing. Okay, what areas are y'all failing in? Okay, is this why you're getting this? And I think that that comes on, again, as he said, these tests are not designed to help us. They're designed to rank us. And South Carolina's been ranked in the 40s as long as I know. And so evidently we're not putting any money to fix that problem.
Yeah, Ibram Kennedy, the author of Being Anti-Racist, is quoted saying that when we get this data back, it's a huge problem. And Steve's right. Data could be very valuable, but the data is always what's wrong with the student, what's wrong with the teacher, what's wrong. It's time we really start looking at what's wrong with the test. What's wrong with an ABCD test may not be the best way to understand a cognitive human being who was born from the earth into this world and this huge universe with all this crazy stuff going on and say, well, I think I'm going to do C today. That's not preparing us for the real world. So going back to the eugenicists that formed this for bias purposes to prove certain things about groups of individuals and people, let's just get away from ABCD testing. So yes, we testing data is good, but the problem is we're not questioning the sources of the test itself. We're just saying, oh, okay, I guess we learned this from the test. The other big thing, I'm sure I will agree, going back to the theme of tonight, was essentialism. We have so many of these tests that when the students actually sit down to take it, we're assuming this data is coming from a student who really, with diligence, took the test. But the problem is they ain't doing that. They're sleeping for 80 minutes of it and then clicking C through the rest of it. So I don't want to use my next 3 months analyzing data for someone who took 10 minutes to take a 50 question test and base my whole, curriculum around that. And part of it, we have so many tests. If we just got rid of all the ones that, heck, if we took half of them away and just which ones are really important, it would make such a difference because then that data, I think, would actually mean something. But for example, Steve, you're teaching, I teach 10th grade English as well. We have these benchmark tests, 48 question benchmarks for Mastery Connect. Kids know it doesn't count for anything. All right. Then you have the map test the next day. And then 2 days of testing for that. And then we have there's these, then every 2 weeks, one gives another CFA. This was last year. And then you have the two actual EOC tests. We've taught them that if all these tests are important, then none of them are. And then I think our scores suffer because then when they get to one that does matter, we've trained them to treat it like it doesn't. So if we could just eliminate, again, more of the stuff that does not matter, the stuff that does would automatically float. So I've been able, thankfully, my administration have success, but they've trusted me to rid the slate of just the junk and just and students appreciate when you're honest with them and just say, hey, oh, the PSAT, that's another one we took, made everybody have to take the PSAT. And I found out it doesn't even count for scholarships in 10th grade. It doesn't count for scholarships when you're in 11th grade. You know, so what are we doing? Why do we make I think it's awesome if someone wants to take that, but to force everyone to take that is too many. That's where, so I think said too, I'm okay telling them, no, can you explain to me how all these tests are truly what's best for the student? Give me some real information. This data is not valid data. It's who was motivated that day and who wasn't. And we can't be motivated when we're trying to do as much as we are. I see that Joyce Abel just joined us. Miss Abel, are you able to hear us? Okay, we'll let her come on camera. She made a wonderful comment on SC for Ed about a month or two ago. I reached out to her, asked her to be on this, and I enjoyed what she said. I'll let her introduce herself when she's ready, if you can hear us now. Ms. Abel. wait till she chimes in.
I think you'll have to
Okay.
unmute yourself, honey.
All right. While we're waiting on that, I'm going to share my screen real quick to make a point here that I think is important. Can y'all see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yay! Yes.
Okay. This was in the book Essentials. It's a very simple illustration. I don't do a whole lot of PowerPoints, but this is a difference in techniques right here. And this one right here is currently what is happening to our students, what is happening to our teachers, and it makes us somewhat stressed out, frustrated. And I think CT Kirk said too, our students start judging themselves based on failure. And when you're doing these many things, these many different directions, you're not setting yourself up to be successful in any of them. At best, you're going to be mediocre, but in reality, you're probably not going to become good at any of them. The difference is if instead of going so many different directions, you simply streamline what you're doing to head in one direction, then this is how people feel a greater sense of accomplishment. So this is our current situation in South Carolina education, uh, public education, and this is kind of what successful organizations do right here. Famously, and when you quote these other people who said stuff, you're never 100% sure if they said it or not. But Steve, can you stop sharing my screen now? The little button went away. There we go. Okay. Similar to that idea, can you streamline stuff to go in one direction? If you look at our own individual lives, look at our jobs as educators and our students, we're asking them to go in so many non-connected directions that you feel perpetually behind. And one of the greatest reasons for increased anxiety and depression is we all feel behind from the get-go. When Steve Jobs designed the iPhone, famously, they asked him what was the hardest part of designing the iPhone, how do you decide what to put on it? He said the hardest part was deciding what not to put on the iPhone to actually make it usable, what to keep off of it. And if you think about it, there were smartphones before then, but then the iPhone, your grandmother, your 3-year-old, anyone can use that phone because it's so simple. So why do we against this idea that being easy is somehow not good? We try to make things so complicated sometimes that no one can use it. And I think that's where we are with our education system. And Inga, you said it, your administrators seem to get it. They don't keep dumping on you and dumping on you. And the reward for that is that streamlined productivity, you're able to glow and shine. CT Kerr, I would say your administrators must be nice to work with too, because you're able to shine that classroom in your costumes, what you've done. And Steve, I don't see how you're able to do all you did with Lisa Ellis's campaign. That's phenomenal. So congratulations as well with that. But when people trust you, when you trust your students, they shine. When you don't trust them, you give them busy work. And as Steve said too, you assume they're not getting any kind of data themselves. So let's give them a whole bunch of other tests to get data. I mean, I guess they assume we don't ever test our students at all. So they got to give us all these extra tests and stuff, I guess. Uh, but studies show that the best indicator of actual representation is when teachers design their own tests for their own students. It's a much better representation of where that student is than that 90-minute ABCD test. That's what studies show. Miss Abel, you're able to join us now. I think you're still on mute there.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry about I'm sorry about the technical difficulty. When you get to be an experienced teacher, sometimes the technology doesn't work the way it should, but I was able to figure it out. Thank you for your patience. Um, what is it that you need me to say other than
Well,
I'm sorry about the technology
well, if
doesn't
you could
work the way
introduce
it should,
yourself, and if you
but
could
I was able
close
to
out
figure
the
it out. Thank
Facebook
you for your
on your
patience.
computer, and that way we won't get
Um,
that feedback coming in either.
what is it that you need me to say? Sorry about the technology. Well, if you could introduce Okay. Can
All
you
right. So
hear
if you,
me now?
yes, ma'am. If you can just introduce yourself, where you teach, how long you've taught, and any other information that you would like to
Okay,
share
what's
about
happening
yourself.
now? I am not a math teacher. I'm a science teacher. I have been a member of the education profession for, this is year 52. So I have seen a lot. I have done a lot. I started working in segregated schools. And that was a different experience as well. What I, what if you don't out loud, you can say no simply by not doing what they ask you to do. Sometimes that's the best way to handle something instead of saying it out loud. If you just don't do it, a lot of times they don't pay attention to the fact that you haven't done it. But if you say it, then you are calling attention to yourself. So it's best not to call attention to yourself. Just
You know,
don't do it.
you made that point on a discussion we were having on SC for Ed message board a few weeks ago, and that's the exact reason I want you on here. I think that is probably the best advice for anyone listening on how to say no. Actions speak louder than words, and just not doing it, because she's right. You don't want to put a target on yourself sometimes and be made an example out of. And what I've realized is, speaking of asking too much and being non-essential, sometimes I don't even think that the system knows everything they're asking us to do. And they won't even notice that if she's saying we're not done it, because I don't even know what they've asked us. They really don't. So just by knowing, now, if you ever get questioned on it, you do need to be able to back up. WISE was not doing it better for your students. You need to know the answer to that. If you're ever asked on it, be able to present that information. But as she says, that's brilliant. We just need to, not even worth our time to explain why we're not going to do it. Rather, just don't do it. And if enough of us just simply stop doing the things that weren't useful, what choice would they have? Look at the teacher shortage out there. It's, are they going to come to our classes and teach for us? So that's in our favor right now. It's an empowering time for educators, because the walkout didn't happen in a protest or something like that. It happened with people just leaving their job. And that's a very powerful way. We'll come back some more of that later. Um, Steve, if you could talk a little bit about speaking of this, your other duties as assigned, and that blog, and kind of your insights between that's currently in our contract and how to deal with that.
Yeah, I think, and I absolutely agree with what Ms. Abel said, that when we're talking about saying no, it doesn't always have to be a conversation that we directly have, because, as you said, Pete, a lot of times there are so many people involved in the system who have asked us to do things, and they have often asked us to do those things, not necessarily because they needed to see them done, but because it was their job to ask. And in a lot of cases, I've found over the years that a lot of times a good administrator will have ways to, and this has been my experience, I've had a lot of great administrators who have had ways of doing what they needed to do and letting me do what I needed to do. And we kind of have an understanding of which of those things that came down from whichever entity above us was something that someone really needed us to do and which ones weren't. I think that a big problem in South Carolina is we have a very unusual teacher contract. To start with, it's completely non-negotiated, which is something that we need a stronger, sense of solidarity, not just with our teacher organizations, but it's something that we have to get together as individual teachers and push for, because we have a contract that says almost nothing about what our compensation will be, where we'll teach, what subject we'll teach is sometimes not even on the contract in a lot of districts. And we have that other duties as a sign language, which I think a lot of teachers think because it's in writing and they signed it is something that they legally have to follow, but there are obviously limits to that. Federal law defines us as non-exempt employees, which I mean exempt employees, which means it's a nice euphemism for we cannot get overtime even if we work overtime. They say that we're exempt from overtime, which is funny. I would associate exempt usually with being something that you don't want to do. We're allowed to work overtime. We're not allowed to be paid for it, but there are limits. And my understanding is that if someone is asking you to do something that is not related to your job as someone who teaches and supervises students, then they might be going outside of what that contract is protecting them from asking you to do for free. And I know that everybody's in a lot of the conditions that people are working in across the state vary so widely. So I would hate to say to somebody, you don't have to do that, because in reality, people don't always follow the rules. But I think as a profession, we need to start pushing back on this idea that we can be asked to do just anything. And I think although we've been trained not to want to talk about money or compensation, I think we need to start saying not only how is this good for the students, but if this is important enough for you to ask me to do, is it important enough for you to pay me for doing? And if it's not, then maybe that's something that the district or the state or whoever, is usually the district that's been put in the position of having to ask for these things, maybe that's something that needs to be deprioritized if it's not important enough to pay for. I know that in my school, coverage for teachers who are out has been really, really huge the past 2 years. And I do think our district has listened to concerns of teachers, but I also think that means teachers had to really consistently voice concerns. And it's not a perfect system anymore, but teachers are being paid for covering some of those classes now, not all, but it's a big improvement over what we had before. And I think, like with a lot of what we're saying, it's not necessarily that there's an evil, anyone up there at the top. The board is not malicious. The superintendent's not malicious. The State Department is not malicious. But they don't know that this is a hardship unless let them know that it's a hardship. So I do think we need to be aware of the fact that there has to be a limit on the other duties as a sign language. And I think we have to be aware that we won't get the things we need to stay in the profession, which is what we all want at the end of the day, for people to want to stay in the profession. We won't be able to create those conditions unless we ask for, push for, demand, whatever verb you want to use. The system's not going to figure it out. I think that's the theme of what everyone's saying tonight. The education system will not fix itself. And the only people that seem to know enough about it to fix it are teachers, parents, and other people who are intimately acquainted with that system. Students, obviously, too, have a huge role in that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chip in on that?
The education system will be acquainted.
With my school, I'm at elementary music, but at my prior school, I had after school choir, but I was never paid for it. In fact, a lot of times I had to use my own money to buy snacks for the kids because it was after school and whatnot. And even though it brought me great joy, I wasn't getting paid for it, and I didn't want that to kind of carry on to the other elementaries in the district. So after COVID and restrictions are lifted, I asked, okay, is there money for a stipend for this? If there isn't, I'm not going to provide it. And unfortunately, I can't have a course of my own at my school. We do the elementary honors choir at my school, which does have a stipend. So that hopefully will help set the precedent to help elementary music teachers at least.
That's such a great point, too. I think we have to remember that it's very easy to get in this mentality of, oh, I did a nice thing and I sacrificed and I did something good for the kids. but it's also easy for that to set a precedent where a lot of other people who may not be in a position to make that same sacrifice now also are expected to do it. So unless we have some solidarity with each other, we have to remember that the only thing that's going to help the students in the end is to make the whole system better. Me making my classroom better at the expense of the rest of the school is not going to really, in the end, that's going to help a small number of students and at the expense of other students and employees. And that's really hard to think about because I think we're all siloed in our own classrooms. And it's easy to think, well, I need to do what I need to do for my kids, which we absolutely do, but it has to be a balance.
Yeah, and like you said, Steve, that mentality also creates where you're going to get more of a load put on you because administration is going to make you feel like, well, I trust you. I know you can get it done, and so it kind of opens you up as a sitting target to be able to say, okay, yes, you can handle more work, and so your no is going to be more of a shocker than anything because you're so used to doing it. So that was one of the things that I had to pull back from and saying, okay, what can one person do, or is that a failure on administration to correctly delegate other people to be able to do things because people are never going to get to the point where they stop taking advantage of you. I wish there was a magic light bulb that somebody would say, you know what, I'm tired of taking advantage of that person and asking them to do everything. But I found out the more stuff that I was saying yes to, the more they want to put on me. And so it wasn't a burden no more for the school to be able to say, well, he'll do call writer duty by himself and nobody else can help him until I was out. And then they was scrounging around trying to find somebody for me to quickly train to be in that position to be able to help rather than saying, okay, you know what? He's been doing it so long by himself. Let's get him some help. Let's change some things around. I think that's where we fell into the trap so much is because we make people think that bettering the kids mean not bettering ourselves or wearing ourselves out. There's nothing a burnt out, tired teacher can do but complain. And then we get into the point of matter where the job is no longer fun. We already know we're not going to be compensated for it, so it's never going to be you did it for the money. If that was the case, then the shortage would have been happening. But now it's going to be to the point that you're not even going to want to do it for the children anymore because there's no finding any joy about it. I always say that to say when I was doing community outreach a lot, I was the only one not enjoying the program. I was so busy trying to make sure that everything was going off without a hitch and everybody else was having fun that I didn't even have fun at the outreach or the event myself until you pull back and say, you know what? I'm not expected to be Superman or Batman or any Marvel or DC character. I'm just a teacher. And my job at the end of the day has to be the best that I can be within the hours that I can be it. Because truth of the matter is everybody's not going to put that same level of sacrifice that one teacher or two teachers may be able to do, and that you don't want to tire out yourself and then be going back to school complaining more than you're excited about it because you're not helping anyone then. You're just busy, but you're not really being intentional. And I try to be more intentional than busy. I'm not one to grade 87 essays, but I can give you 3 questions that's meaningful. And I can judge and assess your ability to write and sentence structure and formulate an idea because I know me. I know what I'm going to be able to do with the 2 hours of planner or an hour 30 planner. Like Steve said, if I got to cover another classroom, and I'm not going to tire myself out. LeBron ain't doing it. Denzel ain't doing it. Nobody else is doing it, and so I'm not going to do it either.
Joyce, how's at your school? How have you been successful pushing back on things, or just communicating things, or not communicating to, as you were saying, just by not doing them? How has that opened up more opportunity for you to be intentional and focus on what you feel is most important?
Your time is what's most important. One of the positive things about where I work is I'm rarely asked to cover a class, which is good. But even if you are asked to cover a class, they don't take your whole planning period. We have 97 minutes of planning, and they would split it between 2 teachers, which is respectful, in my opinion. And there have been times when I don't get asked often, and there have been times when I have been asked and I have said no. Or it's the kind of situation where if I have something to do, I don't go to that teacher's class. I have the students come to me. So I can continue to do what I need to do in my classroom. that's been the most important thing. A lot of it also depends on your administration. My administration appreciates the fact if you're a good teacher and you're doing what you're supposed to do. As a matter of fact, if you're doing above and beyond, which is what I do, um, then if I say no, it's not an issue because I'm not asked very often. So if I say no, it's not an issue. Um, but like I said, the main thing is not to call attention to yourself. That's the main thing. You can say no, but you don't have to say it out loud. You just don't do it. And they
That's
don't pay attention because, just like you were saying, nobody's going to come to your classroom. You know, we've been asked to add learning intention and outcome expectations to our lesson plans.
hmm
Okay, but a lesson plan is just that, a plan. The most important thing is what you do in your classroom. And so if you want to know what I'm doing, you don't read my lesson plan, you show up
Amen.
in my classroom. And they
Amen.
don't have time. But the
Yes,
bottom
sir.
line is when they come into my classroom, I'm teaching.
hmm
Okay. I mean, and that's basically, and it's not about a plan because sometimes a a plan is just that, a plan.
hmm
Sometimes stuff happens and it's not planned. And so what's going to you have my lesson plan and when you walk in, you don't see that in my plan, what are you going to do? Am I going to be in trouble because what you see is not what's in my lesson plan? Or am I going to be praised because what I am doing is beneficial to the students? Which one is most important? So you have to pay attention, and as long as you're handling your business, you shouldn't have a problem. And we all know what handling our business is. We know our students better than anybody else. We
Yes.
know what the environment is like in our classrooms. I have some classes that are off the chain, and then I
hmm
have others that come in and sit down and they're quiet and they do what they're supposed to do. And my principal showed up with one of my quiet classes, my 10th graders, chemistry, and everybody was sitting at their desk and everybody was working on their laptop. I didn't even see her coming into the room, but my agenda was posted, and so she was walking around looking to see what the children were doing, and everybody was on task except one young man. And she asked him about it, and he said, I have already completed my assignments. So she left him alone because he had. And then there was another class. I had just finished giving instructions, and I allow my students to get up and move around. I don't believe in sitting down and not moving. I don't do that, so I don't believe in doing that. They can be themselves, but I'm going to be myself too. That's how that works. And one young man declared, I turned in the assignment. I said, but I don't see it. It was on Schoology. I said, I don't even see your name in the list. So he was searching. So another student walked up and said, she told us she might not be able to see it, so you have to be prepared to show it to her. And I said, thank you. And I looked at my principal and said, see, you give instructions and they don't listen. So she witnessed that. But one person had heard what I said. So it's all about the main thing is it's the relationship that you have with your students.
Yes.
Because there have been many, many times when an observer has come into my classroom. I didn't know the observer was in my classroom, but the children did. And if they care about you, they behave when there's an observer in the classroom.
Truth.
So that's why I'm still teaching because I have something to contribute. Yes, there are days when I am very, very frustrated, but it's not because of my kids. That's not it. It's the other stuff.
hmm
It's the other duties as assigned. It's the other expectations. And I will say this now, I've had a conversation with my administrator, my principal, about how the district office tells them what to do, and then they tell us what to do. And she understood that. She understood that. She said, "Oh, do you mean that we get told what to do and then we pass it on to you?" I said, "Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about." So they understand. They understand. But like I said, it's all about how you respond to it. It's all about that. And you choose your battles. You choose your battles wisely. You don't run around screaming and yelling and announcing to everybody, "I'm not going to." You don't do that.
Yeah.
Because you're calling attention to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're quiet about it, you can probably get away with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we're about to run out of time here. Brilliant points, and as Brenda Stover said, great wisdom, and thanks for sharing that. Summed up so wonderful what we've been talking about this evening. Those directives that usually lead to other duties assigned, the busy work that gets in the way of what is essential, the relationship with the students, so much of it comes from the top down in education, very distant from the
Mm-hmm.
classroom. As I pointed
Mm-hmm.
out, it's not necessarily, mustache twirling evil villains somewhere coming up with diabolical things. It's just people who have been removed from the classroom for so long that they don't really know what's happening. So by flipping that
Yep.
system, where this my best advice I get my best is from my students. Way, but I have wonderful administrators, but I learn best where I need to do better from my students. That's where I get my most input from. And then if I pass that to
Mm-hmm.
my administrators pass that to the district office, and they pass that to politicians. I feel like that's the way the system should work to get what's essential, but it's just the opposite, as you said. It comes from the top down, and for too long, teachers have just been making it work because we're guilted into, well, we care. I know you'll do it for the students, but as CT pointed out, we need to speak up and say yes, but what's best for the teacher, their teacher, it's just like what's best for the doctor is going to be what's best for that patient, because we are the ones giving the service to these students. And so I encourage everyone watching right now to realize it is so important, not just as Joy said, just to gripe and be angry, but don't do it. And that alone speaks a lot. Or find a way, if you have a good relationship with your administrators like I do, to talk to them, but start sharing your voice. We have to just stop making it things that should not be working work, because as soon as what's not working fails, it'll just go. And that's what we're starting to see. Teachers are leaving. It's just not working. Good. Let the stuff that's not working die, so that now we can build back something that truly is better. And it starts with our individual voices, listening to our students and communicating that up the chain. We're strong together collectively. Anybody else want to share real quick in our last minute what you feel is one thing you think is most important, most essential in your profession, is your craft?
One of the things that I have found that works very well for me, um, and helps me when I say no silently by not doing it, I have a wonderful relationship with my parents. I learned a long time ago to create um, a parent group for each one of my classes. And so I send emails on a regular basis to let them know what we're doing in class, and they appreciate it. You don't always hear back from them, you don't get comments back from them, but if you have a child that forgets who they are or whose they are, and you email the parent, you get support, and that's important. So that's what has worked for me, and it doesn't take long to create a group, a parent group for each one of your classes, and then when you get ready to email them, then you copy and paste.
I think
Yeah.
one thing that's essential to me is definitely building up the relationship with your principal so that your no don't have to be under radar no, but it's a no from a mutual place of respect. I think when your administrator knows that you are a family person or you're a person that values your mental health, but you're a person that lives outside of school, then they have that respect that they're not going to actually do things that's going to be detrimental to your health or cause conflict in your life. My principal knows that I have dual roles outside of school, and so I'm not asked to join tons of committees. It's more or less can you do and not you are told to do. And I think that comes with respecting leadership and open communication and that's afraid of administration or afraid of school board or afraid of parents. I want to be an educator that shows, and I think a lot of that comes from the way that you teach. That kids are going to go home and tell their parents, "My teacher is the best. I want to be in that class." They're going to brag about you to administration, so administration is going to know that you hold weight in the educational realm. My town knows that I wear costumes, so it's nothing new that I'm going to do something that's going to inspire students. So when I say, "Hey, my life is more important," hey, my kids have an appointment or this I need to be at. It's more or less getting me to do what I want to do. They don't ask me to football coach, but if they ask me, do you want to announce the games? Yes, I'll announce the games, but totally. And I agree that sometimes your no has to be under the radar, but I think also it should be a standard that you have for yourself. That if you're saying no, you're not saying no because you're being a rebellious person, but you're saying no because you generally care about your welfare and the welfare of your family. Because I heard a lot of times in print, people say this as a cliche, but it has to be a stable point of all of our lives. Your family has to be first. When those kids go home, they have parents that's going to continue the education portion. You're going to love those kids only for the 8 hours that you have for them, and that you're going to pray for them when they're gone. But you're not essentially their parent. But your kids that go home cannot get the lack because you're parenting somebody else's kids all day, every day, all throughout the day. And so being able to say no and the no from the kindness of your heart that no, I don't have the time because even our Lord and Savior says no to us and we don't get back and he don't always do it under the radar. Sometimes you say, well, God, I want to marry this person. No, that ain't the person I got for you. God, I want this no. And so the no has to be one that comes from a place of, listen, what I value is important. At the end of the day, no matter how much we love our students, it is our job. It is a job, and I don't know other jobs. I don't know if LeBron James takes basketball home with him and he focuses on his fans. I think he does what his job requires, and then the rest of that time, I think that has to be the validity of our no. That we're not trying to say, I'm going to do everything because I want the principal to love me or I want my parents to love me. But even I want the children to love me. At the end of the day, I'm going to do the best job that I'm doing for my 8 hours. And then after that is my time to be me. And that's my standard. I think that when that standard is important because you have 30 something other teachers or 40 something other teachers that administration may never go to because they know their standard. But if you have low standards, then they're going to continue to go to you because you don't have that standard that teacher across the hall says. So they say, you know what, if I'm sick in my body, I'm taking off. You know, how many of us have personal days that's stacking up because we're so afraid to be in school because we feel like we're the superhero in that school rather than taking that mental health day and saying, you know what, I got these days and I was that way and I didn't want to miss school. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Sickness in the body. I got to be that. I got to be that. Until I realized teachers were dying and they was replacing them teachers. And so I
Thank you. Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I think all of that, I agree. And I think I think what we were talking about, this tension between kind of flying under the radar and being able to do it more vocally, it depends on your school environment. You know, some of us can be more vocal than others. And I think like with any other kind of advocacy, I think each teacher has to look at themselves and say, like, am I in a position where I can afford to actually maybe speak on behalf of some other people or not? Because early in my career, I wasn't in that position. I have a great administration now who values my opinion, and I've worked on that relationship with them for a really long time. I don't want my first year teacher, you know, to say no to something. I would rather them bring that up in our staff meeting or something, like our department meeting, so that the more experienced teachers among us could maybe do something on their behalf or help them figure out how to navigate that. But I think the key thing is that we need to figure out ways to build more community so that we can have each other's backs, so that we don't feel like we're putting ourselves out alone saying yes or no to something, not based on what we want to do or need to do, but we need to have the feeling that someone is with us on that. And that those kind of communities take a long time to build sometimes, especially if I've been in school environments that weren't as welcoming to that. And it was very difficult to find that common cause with other teachers because everybody was afraid. So I hope that I've got a love-hate relationship with social media, but I think that it has let us see more that other people are going through the same things as us. And I hope that that's going to make us continue to build some communities in this state to try to push things forward for all of us, so that so one person doesn't have to feel like they have to fight it out with whoever. It might not be their administration, but whoever's making them do the things that they don't have the capacity to do.
Inga?
I think Emily has been saying it greatly.
Can I make one more comment?
In
I'm sorry.
Yep. Go ahead, Joyce.
I am the educator rights chairperson for the SCEA. And so in terms of knowing what my rights are, I worked for the SCEA, and that's what I did. I handled it. I'd have, if you are a member, because there are some administrators that have a great deal of respect for the SCEA. So that can be helpful.
Indeed.
Yep. So like as Steve was saying, for social media, it's been great to find our communities. But with the SCEA, that's where I think you'll really have the best community and the best chance of making a change.
Yes, I think we're about out of time here, but just to finish up, absolutely. The SCEA, SC for Ed's been huge these past few years too, getting that momentum and energy as well. And as Joyce said, being a member of the SCEA, when you have that and you say no or push back, someone comes at you, there is a respect when someone sees you're part of the organization. They say, oh, okay, you have support, you have connection, as saying right here, that we can, there's that strength. And I just want to close with reminding everyone that same thing I tell my students, trust that each of you is a divine miracle beyond comprehension. And when you say no, when you stand up, when you shine, when you share what you have to share, you don't have to, if you're upset and angry, that's fine. That saying, what we resist persists. There's something to, I know my truth. I'm going to share my truth. I'm going to speak my truth, and it is my truth. And trust that truth that you have to share. And even if it gets pushed back initially, just stay with your truth. Stick with your truth and share your truth, connect other truths. I love what Steve said too, of helping others in that situation. And we are in an empowered time right now simply because people silently saying no and quietly quitting is a major thing right now. And we have power by sharing our truth. Trust yourself. If you're listening right now, I just want to say, trust yourself. And instead of making things that should not be working, continue to work. Say no, just be silent, don't do it. And that's going to be it. And I really would encourage you, if you're not a member of SCEA, if you're not active on SC for Ed, to really look at those things. That's where we join together. And I hope you have enjoyed this conversation tonight. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining. We'll have follow-up to it. Check out C.T. Kirk on Amazon to buy his books on Amazon as well. Type his name in. I do encourage y'all to buy Essentialism. It's a wonderful book about helping you identify what is most important by getting rid of what is not important. And I would also encourage you, doing this through the SCA, to join the SCA. The whole team is kicking butt right now and taking names. We are empowered. We are motivated. Thank you, Lisa Ellis, for running for State Superintendent of Education. It has us moving in a positive direction. And close with the SCA saying of your voice, our strength, their future. So thank you so much for watching. Does anyone have anything you want to add here to sign off with? Okay, y'all have a blessed evening. Thank you all for joining us.